are going to go ahead and kick off the first webinar for the Florida Association of Counties and the Institute for County Government here at our podcast and webinar studio, Studio 67 in Leon County in the Capital County, the first one of 2021. I'm Ginger Delagal, the Executive Director of the Florida Association of Counties. With us today is one of our valued private marketplace partners that helps the association brings solutions for the business of government to you all at the local level. And that's Joe Rulison from Three+One, which is a fintech firm, and Joe is going to tell us what that means, out of the state of New York. Joe himself has a very deep and broad history with public service, having been an elected official himself. His firm in New York actually does concentrate just in the private sector space of providing liquidity analysis to those of us at the local level who manage taxpayer dollars. And really, the ultimate question is, how can we get the most revenue out of those dollars that we are holding at the local level so that we can then reinvest those dollars on behalf of our taxpayers back into local programs and services? And Joe and his firm really helps with some of the very technical choices, but very profitable choices that can be made. Joe and his firm, Three+One, also have a valued partnership with the National Association of Counties and a very strong pilot program in the state of New York with the New York counties there. And we are beginning to roll him out here in the state of Florida. So, Joe, thank you for joining us today here in Studio 67. And we are looking forward to your top 10 list for the 2021 fiscal forecast. But before we get started, I just want to pause for a minute and let you say hello and Happy New Year to Florida county officials all around the state.
Great. Well, Ginger, thank you so much. And Happy New Year, everyone. I have to tell you that I'm very envious. I'd love to be down in Florida right now. Love your state and love being down there and have a number of friends that are down there. And we are up here in Rochester where it's gray. No snow yet, which is very unusual, but one that we have quite the restrictions for travel and with the COVID-19. So as a result, I would love to be down there in person, but that's not possible right now. But Ginger, really appreciate it. And being able to talk to all of you today is a great privilege and honor, and to be a partner with FAC and to know, working with you and your members, to really develop an approach with our CashVest platform by Three+One. And what that is a liquidity analysis and data service that really provides you a very clear and holistic perspective of where cash is at all times and what the ability is to use that data with confidence with your advisors or within the state pool to figure out where you want to put your dollars to maximize the greatest amount of earnings, while also looking at the different aspects of where you're banking, how the banking is, how you look at your rating and the quantitative and qualitative liquidity analysis that can be occurred to help improve your rating, and also giving you a peace of mind, especially during these times that we're seeing from last year into this year. And so I'm very pleased to be able to talk about my 10 top trends that I see going into 2021. And if you'd like, Ginger, I can go right into my top list if you'd like.
Yes, please, because I've taken a quick peek at that top list and there's some great news to be had there. So I think as we kick off 2021, we'd like to hear some of that. So take it away, Joe.
Great, and there's some interesting themes that you'll hear throughout it. I have been doing the top 10 for a number of years. I will tell you, I could never predicted 2020, and it's a year I don't want to go back and have to repeat. And the same point, have to be so wrong with predictions. At the same point, there's a lot that we learned from 2020 that's going to help us so much into 2021, and what I see as a very positive forecast going beyond as well. But I never would have predicted that we would have seen a pandemic worldwide, a collapse in the GDP by 32%, to see at the same time conflicting messages of a market that was going through new heights, and at the same point seeing other kind of natural disasters, whether it be hurricanes or tornadoes or wildfires. All of this at once was amazing to hit and to know that we were able to weather in such a way as a country to be able to be in the position that we are now to look forward. And as I look at that, it provides us with information I think is going to be extremely interesting for 2021. First of all, let's go into what I see as my top number one trend, and that is with the new administration. I do believe you're going to see a split in the balance of Congress. We'll find out tonight or in the lingering weeks to follow. But which to see, no matter what the case is, I think you've seen a precedence of where a high number of executive orders are going to come out of the White House. And as a result, you'll also see with Janet Yellen as the Secretary of Treasury, that you'll most likely see some further oversight of financial institutions, which means that you'll probably see a revisit of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform. That was a reform that we watched very closely. We've talked about the changing landscape of banking and of where the marketplace was going of Main Street versus Wall Street. And Dodd-Frank, as we saw the piling of regulations that were occurring there, over 25,000 pages that were written that occurred that really put a much constraint on banking over the previous years until the administration that's in now really had cut back on a number of those administrations and regulations, and it really put Dodd-Frank onto the back burner. I believe that's going to come back, and you'll see where there'll be continual, probably new regulations that will try to rein in the banks over the course of time. Now, from that, there are some real pros that you'll see that reflect in that I'll get into as we go through this. The second trend that I see is sales tax. While it might still be down in 2021, it was actually did not get hit as hard as there was the expectations that occurred, I would say, in the second quarter of 2020 because of the pandemic. Why is that? Well, there are a number of factors. One was internet sales. I don't think anybody ever would have thought probably 4 or 5 years ago that you would be seeing an Amazon truck come up and down your street, not once a day, but multiple times a day, and the UPS and also FedEx. Internet sales went through the roof, which now with internet sales tax, that is starting to have a major effect for those communities, for those counties that do in fact receive the sales tax and rely heavily on that. We're also seeing where the outdoor dining, but also that the pickup dining, along with the home improvement and auto sales actually have been very strong. Auto sales have had some of their best months they've ever seen in the last few months of 2020. And a lot of that had to do with the stimulus money that came through and money that actually went from the Fed that came into the homes, and there were actually those dollars were being used for purchases that I think a number of people thought would go into savings, but they didn't. It really put a big surge into a different kind of purchasing, while we saw that the direct restaurants and the retail stores and travels were down. I do believe they will still see some pressures in 2021, but internet will continue to improve and will continue to have that strength. And I believe home improvement will as well. And I don't think you will see any shortage of auto sales. I think that number will continue. And if you're relying on gas tax, I think that again will also see a very positive approach outside of the travel. My next trend, number 3, is short-term interest rates will remain low. I believe this will be a pattern all the way through 2022. However, if there's any kind of unexpected inflation that hits or anything that happens that would be an international circumstance that could possibly put pressure on rates, you may in fact see a little bit of a bump in rates that could be unexpected, but I don't think that's going to be 2021. You will see where longer term rates will continue to expand a little bit. You'll see where there's a curve of the short term rates remain low, but you will see the 5, 10, and 30-year rates start to bump up as we did in the latter part of 2020. Now, why that's important is that keep in mind, don't fall into that fallacy that because the Federal Reserve brought rates down, the short-term rates to 0 to 25 basis points, that there's not value to cash. There really is still value to cash. And when you look at the pool that is being offered, the alternatives that you have right there in Florida, and the ability of working with your advisor, when you look and are able to determine how long you have your cash for, being proactive is extremely important. And knowing that you're looking at what your cash needs are, not what you think you need, but what you actually need, is extremely important, taking advantage of that. You still are seeing 10, 20, 30, 40 basis points out in the marketplace. Depends on where you are and how you look at your cash and how you put that in perspective. And using that information with your banks and using it with your advisor and using it to determine within your finance office as to where the best point is to put that cash. But it's extremely important to keep in mind that cash is not to remain dormant, and it can still be a revenue generating asset for you in 2021. The fourth is, with everything that occurred from 2020 with COVID-19, we see that as a year that I think has every bit of historical importance of the Great Depression. It is a multi-generational experience that we have gone through and we continue to go through. What we see from 2020 to what we'll see in 2021, the liquidity and financial data that's going to be pulled from that, and to see how you in fact adapted to those changes, how you handled the crisis, how you handled multiple crises, whether it be the COVID and other types of overlay occurrences that occurred, as I mentioned, whether it be from a financial and whether it be from a natural catastrophe on top of COVID. This is going to be extremely important to use that data to see how did you weather the storm? How did you weather it from a liquidity standpoint? And what did you do in order to deal with those? Did you have the cash on hand and liquidity necessary to meet the needs? Did you use stimulus money, and how was that stimulus money used? Did you need to go out and borrow? All of that data that's pulled together will be extremely important, that will be historic for you to use in the future. And having that type of historical patterns will be very important for you to be able to refer back to, and how you were able to, in fact, address those kind of concerns. That's extremely important as you look at your budgeting, as you look at your liquidity, and as you look at your cash flow. Just keep in mind when you're looking at your cash flow is the day-to-day ebbs and flows that occur within your organization that is going to show you where you stand. Liquidity is the actual cash that and financial transactions that occur on your side and also on the bank side. And when you marry all that together, you see patterns that allow you to look and say, how in fact did we deal with that, and how could it be useful for future occurrences? My fifth is, given the low rate environment, I do believe you're going to see continual refinancing of municipal debt, or you might see some issuance of debt. This will be important because with the rating agencies, you're finding that the liquidity patterns that I just mentioned are playing a greater emphasis for rating. Up to 10% now of your rating score goes to how are you handling your liquidity, how much cash do you have, how do you plan to use your liquidity going forward. That kind of information is extremely important. And as you do that, it's important because the liquidity will allow you to determine, do you need the cash, and for how long will you need the cash? What's the amount that you'll need? But having that will be a very big help for you to be able to get the best rating possible from the rating agencies. And if you have qualitative and quantitative liquidity analysis, and you're able to give that to the rating agencies, that can be either allow you to maintain or get a positive rating. I do expect this year that you'll see the rating agencies give a negative outlook to the states in general. We've already seen it in New York. I think you'll see it in California and others. but those that have been hit very hard, that are looking for additional stimulus money, that will put a lot of pressure on the Biden administration for another round, which I do believe in January into February, you'll see another stimulus bill come out that will go directly to the states, but also there'll be money, I believe, that's going to come to the local counties as well and to other municipalities. That's going to be extremely important. But to have the highest rating possible, it's important for you to keep in mind that liquidity is playing a major role with the rating agencies. 6, and this is so important, technology will continue to be a big focus for 2021. And why I say that is we are in the middle of a digital revolution. You're seeing technology coming to the forefront, just like we're communicating right now. COVID-19 forced us to have to work remotely and to communicate in new ways. And with that, it continues to mean that technology has to be embraced. We're finding that how do we do banking differently? We find that instead of going to a branch, that we've had to use it in terms of remote banking, online banking. I think blockchain will be a big emphasis down the road. It won't necessarily be embraced by public entities immediately, but technology where we have been somewhat slower than the norm in the public sector versus private, public has had to take time to embrace. But this has forced all of us to have to look at technology in a different way. But with that comes what is important is that with the greater use of technology, there are opportunities for those that want to commit fraud to commit fraud. And that's the cyber security with malware and other ways that we're having to look for ways to embrace ways to really be secure in how we use technology and how we do financial transactions. So you'll continue to see a major emphasis towards technology, but at the same point, you're going to see a real emphasis of training for cybersecurity. We all know, and we see this day in and day out, that we're finding that even when you see that the US Treasury and other parts of the US government were hacked, that's going to be one of our greatest threats. And we just have to be on guard with the use of technology. But it should not keep you from using the technology. It allows you to be more efficient. It allows you to be more economical. And it allows you to do so much more given all the other stresses you have to deal with. As a treasurer of a water authority, I have been treasurer for 14 years now. I have been pushing with our staff to continue to look for ways to use technology to help us. And I think that's going to be a very big theme going forward. And we'll just find ways. And it's going to get better and better as we go forward. Number 7, I think you're going to continue to see climate control and green initiatives continue to gain major public support. I think solar is going to be huge. I think wind power, while it's been there, you're going to find, the words of carbon footprint, ways of looking to reduce the carbon footprint is going to be a continual push. And I know there's been a lot of talk of a Green Deal. I think what you'll see is some kind of a way down compromise type of an initiative, but it will continue to have where you'll see ways of how to meet our electricity demand. One of the things I find interesting is that while there's a big push for electric cars and using electric cars with Tesla and others as they roll out, the problem is we don't have the electrical grid to support all this. That means we're going to have continual infrastructure around climate control and having to go for green initiatives. We're going to have to build up that infrastructure. We're going to have to build up the electrical grid. I do believe new sources of taxes will most likely be applied on that side as also a substitute for reduced gas consumption, which has been a big form of taxing for gas taxes that we've seen in the past. So I think you're going to see a lot of public and private partnership together on that initiative. Number 8, that may not apply a lot to you, but it will. One way or another, higher ed does come over across on the public side. And I do believe that we're seeing across the country, public entities are having to deal with their community colleges and also even with private higher ed. They're going through a struggle right now. They've had a tough time when students can't be on campus if you're in a state that has restricted that. And we're finding that the bread and butter for higher ed institution is the room and board. That's where they make their most money. Online, while most have adopted online, they're having to get really good at it. Just as I've talked about us getting used and using technology to our advantage, higher ed's having to do that between themselves and the students and their faculty. And so you'll continue to see that, but it will mean there'll be a greater emphasis on online. There'll be hybrid, where they'll try to get the students back as quick as possible. It's interesting, one stat is that over 75% of the students are saying while they will use online, they want to be back on campus. They want interactive, in-person engagement is extremely important to them. And so with that being the case, you won't see as much construction on campuses occur. And just keep in mind in 2025, 26, higher ed will have some other stresses that are going to be involved with less population of students, because from 2008 to 2009, when we had the financial collapse, we had a much lower number of babies born. And that's now being felt. It's being felt in the secondary schools, and that's going to be felt very much by the higher ed institutions, which means it's going to be very competitive. And there'll be a marketplace that students will probably have a greater option of getting into different schools that they would not have had the opportunity to before. Number 9 is for banking services. I believe the banks are going to be continually adopting new forms of technology, bringing new technology to you. At the same end, as interest rates remain low, and having been a former government banker and a market president for Bank of America, I know how they do liquidity. I know how they deal with coming up with their spreads in terms of deposit rates and what the bank makes. And for a bank, they do very well when rates go in one direction or the other. The big swings are very helpful to them to create their spread models. When it becomes very dormant, that means there's less spread within their deposit rates. As a result, you'll see a lot of pressure on the banks to increase fees for the services they have to offer. And so with that being the case, I do believe a number of institutions, a number of entities that wanted to do a bank RFP in 2020, but because of COVID did not, you'll see a big spike of bank RFPs occur in 2021. And I think that's important there's a lot of competition. Don't let anybody think the banks aren't wanting your business. They do. And as a result, for a bank RFP, the ability to go out and get competitive pricing is out there. We have a product called Bank RFP Prep. It's RFP Prep. And that's a first of its kind online banking service that allows you to do away with all paper, very efficient, very quick, and allows you to go out and get competitive pricing, but the system will allow you to compare apples to apples. And we're seeing very competitive pricing coming back, much better than what one would assume, and also very good earnings credit rates that would otherwise in the marketplace you would not think would be the case. And then finally, I would say in-person type of events. We're doing virtual right now. I think you'll see a hybrid in 2021. You'll see where we're using, just like we are right now, as the first conference for you this year, the first virtual call, that you'll see conferences coming back. And between online and in person, that's going to develop. But I will tell you that there's a real pinned up demand for in-person conferences. And I know you had a hybrid earlier at the end of last year. That's only going to grow this year. And I will tell you that in 2022, you're going to see a roaring 22 come back. We believe that's going to be extremely positive for in-person conferences, but you'll still see a hybrid approach being used because we've learned this. You're going to learn that in-person meetings, a lot of hybrid will occur, that still conferences virtually will happen, or virtual in-person meetings will occur, but the conferences are going to come back. And as I was telling Ginger before we had this call, I think you're going to see attendance go right through the roof. I know I'm dying to get out of New York. So as a result, I think that's a real positive trend for what we see of conferences for 2020 2021 into 2022.
Well, and Joe,
I have to tell you, yes, Ginger.
I was just going to say, if I could pick up on that note, that is, as your 10th prediction, a great one for the state of Florida in terms of tourist tax revenue, sales tax revenue, the gas tax revenues that come along with all of our facilities in this state being able to reach their capacity of conferences and events. So that, as number 10, is fantastic news. And so on that, Joe, I do have to ask you, so what percentage of predictions do you think over the last several years that you make, do they actually come true?
I've had a common 75% or better correct trends that I've seen. So I've had a pretty good long history of it and do a lot of research on this. And so I've been very positive. I would say I was probably around 60% for 2020, but I'd like to be 75% or above, Ginger.
Well, I'll take those 75% odds on behalf of the state of Florida, especially if that translates into sales tax revenues, as well as just having people who enjoy the state of Florida, because that's a lot of what we do here. And just a couple of comments before we head to questions, Joe, that I was just noticing as you were walking us through your 10 predictions of 2021 is that it's almost like you've been down here in Florida, meaning, your comments and what you're seeing on the sales tax side. I mean, a couple of things there. We're certainly seeing what other parts of the country are seeing in terms of construction and construction starts, not only new construction here in Florida, but many renovations, a lot of rebuilds and build outs. Just construction is starting. I mean, hammers are slinging and you can hear those sounds just even out on the streets. And in a way that is not surprising in terms of, people being sent home. And so they're focusing on their yards, they're focusing on their homes, they're focusing on, investment properties that they may have, or people who are wanting to move even from their current location, whether it's in a metropolitan area or even from other parts of the country, because now they can telecommute. So I think we're definitely seeing all of those construction starts. We are seeing that the sales tax revenues, based on what the last state estimations are not quite as dire as we thought at one time in the summer that they might be. And then just interestingly, I mean, this is one of the priorities, meaning internet sales tax, of leveling that playing field from purchases online to those brick and mortar stores, of leveling that playing field. That's one of the pieces of even this association's legislative platform. And then, I mean, obviously, you've hit on technology, which is also a huge priority for the counties in the state of Florida when it comes to broadband build out and just the immediacy of needing broadband, particularly in our rural areas, but everywhere. There are even pockets in metro urban areas that have horrible service. But when the need for telehealth became literally, an overnight need, when we needed education facilities and to be able to have our students and teachers to connect to each other so that we could roll out, our public education system in the midst of COVID. I think certainly we have just the most poignant example of what counties have been talking about for years whenever it comes to broadband. And so I'm also just very encouraged to see that that one is on your list, because just to my little brain and the way it works, the more people are paying attention to that issue, the more people are paying attention to that issue, and the better it is for the counties here in Florida in terms of advocacy and being able to move the needle on that. And then obviously your comments on green infrastructure, we would probably call it in the association resiliency infrastructure. And frankly, I'm also very glad to see that on the list of your forecast for 2021. because resiliency here in Florida, having the vast majority of our counties be on coastline is really just huge, even from storms, let alone if you talk about other resiliency issues. But just that one alone is one that our county officials here in Florida have been focused on for years and years and years. And so those were just sort of some of my wrap-up takeaways from your top 10 list. And I know we told folks we wouldn't keep them too long, so I wanted to pause and just see if you had any closing comments, or Corrigan, if I am missing any questions. I want to make sure that we address those.
I would say, Ginger, that the outlook for 2021 and beyond it looks very positive. I think 2021 is going to be a year of checkup, just seeing how are we, how did we weather 2020, and what does this mean? And we're sort of making ourselves through, and we're looking through, and we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. I think what you've done in Florida has been amazing. The resiliency and exactly what your state has done is you all have done an amazing job during a time that people really needed the help. You were right there, and you're right at the front lines, and really demonstrated the American spirit. At the same end, I just want to let you know that we're seeing a change occurring with that digital revolution. Just as you're saying, there's work that still has to be done to adopt it, but at the same point, make sure it's available to everybody with the broadband. But it does mean that you have different areas that the large areas of metropolitan will continue to grow out as you see where individuals want to work at home or will work at home. It doesn't mean they have to be in a big city to do that. So they'll be in areas that will see growth, and the smaller second tier cities and counties are going to see growth that I think is going to be very positive in addition. But the Southeast is going to continue to see massive expansion. And I think that's going to be very positive, and you can manage it. You've managed it well in the past. So I'm really excited about what we have. Did I want 2020 to occur? Absolutely not. But what it did do, it just allowed us to get stronger with each other and to be there to meet the needs of those that need it. And at the same point, to build for those in the future that I think we're there to serve.
That's great. And Joe, just one last question, and then we will wrap up here. And that is, are you seeing anything in research or even anecdotally that may be, I would say, fear that in the public sector and on the part of county officials around the country coming sort of out of COVID now? Is there any lingering fear that would be connected to, I think, sometimes what is a human reaction to hold on to cash instead of investing it? And are you seeing anything in the research or even anecdotally that lingering fear may even make our fists a little bit tighter around cash as opposed to investing it and really turning it into an additional revenue source for us?
That's a great question, Ginger. My concern is that individuals, because where rates are and because of what they have seen from the pandemic, that they have to hold on to cash just in case. And as a result, they become dormant, and you can become somewhat complacent, thinking, well, there's nothing I can earn, so therefore let's just leave it there. But I think the greatest message that I can come out with is that your cash has value, and every penny you can earn that can go back to help do what you're doing for those you're serving is essential. Putting that money in, whether you think it's zero, you can be into a pool and earn 10 basis points. You can go out a little bit further and get over 40 basis points. That kind of money, surprisingly, you're not talking just dollars or cents. You're talking tens, hundreds, even millions of dollars. That can all have a major impact. So I do believe there'll be more COVID money. When that money comes, please put it to work or put it to investment. Just don't leave it within the banks or be brought to the thought or told that that has no value. It does. And that's extremely important as we're looking under every rock. And we want to know that money is going back to helping you to alleviate stress, to have the peace of mind that you've got the dollars necessary to serve those that you're serving.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and for taking the risk of going out on a limb and giving us some predictions for 2021. And on behalf of the association, we look forward to working with you throughout the course of this year.
Same here. We look forward to it as well. And please keep me accountable. So this time next year, you can, if I tell you, I'll refer back to the list. But we really appreciate it and want to do the very best for you and look forward to being a strong partner at by CashFest by 3+One. So thank you so much, Ginger.
Thank you, Joe.
Megan, thanks for arranging as well.